Now, the first thing that I want to move into is statistics is all about studying stuff in the world. All statistical problems are word problems. You probably hated word problems. Sorry. But the thing is, I think it's easy for us to disconnect mathematics from the world, from reality. But the fact is, all mathematics are about telling us a story about the real world. They're about having an understanding that is systematized and allows us to explicate the things around us in a very precise way. Again, a kind of quantified logic. So mathematics all mean to do that. I think it's easy and we to lose in early education the fact that mathematics is in fact a way of knowing about the world. That is what it is for. It is not just a rote exercise to solve for an unknown value or practice subtraction. So if all of our stuff is measurements, data about things in the world, then we have to know who we're talking about. That's one of the first things to think about here in statistics. In fact, statistics comes from a German word that comes from the Greek statisticum, which actually means the study of the state. So the whole idea is that we're trying to study the groups of people. It was an idea for governments to be able to understand who the people they serve are, right? What those people want, taxation, all of these types of things. And so statistics is the study of us. It's the study of the state, the group, the aggregate of people. That's how it started. Now we use statistics to study things that aren't just people, but in classes like this, which are statistics for the psychological sciences, behavioral sciences, biomedical applications, we often focus on people, right? So, but let's talk about some of the general terms for how we describe the people we're talking about in statistics. So the smallest level is what we call a unit of analysis, sometimes called a single case, right? This is the individual unit that's being observed. It's the smallest level. It's the thing the data specifically describes. Now, it's easy to mistakenly assume this then means people all the time. And although it will in much of our stuff, it doesn't necessarily mean people. So for example, if you're a microbiologist, you might be studying a cell and you might be taking measurements about cells. And so if you're doing that, you have data that describe a cell. Now, there are trillions of cells inside of a human body. So obviously within any human, there's trillions of potential units of analysis when it comes to taking measurements on a cell. So this is a great example that you can have a unit of analysis much smaller than a person. You could also have one much larger. So for example, if you're a political theorist or an economist, you might study countries or states, and you might get data that describes those. So for example, GDP, gross domestic product, is a aggregate measure about the wealth of a country. And so GDP is data that describes a country, right? You could talk about the safety of a neighborhood, right? Now, it's not the safety of you in the neighborhood, it's the neighborhood, right? And so these are pieces of data that describe units that might contain many single individuals, right? But what you're actually measuring is that larger unit, the country or the neighborhood. And so the unit of analysis is whatever you're observing or measuring, the thing the data directly describes. So when you have a group of these units of analysis, we call that a sample. And a sample is a group, but not all of the units of analysis. So you'll also hear that a sample is a subset of the units of analysis from the population, okay? So you get a group of units of analysis, we call it a sample of them, right? You think about like a sampler of chocolates, right? You have to get a group of chocolates. If you just get a piece of chocolate, it's not a sample, right? Right, a sampler, it contains many of units, right? Many of the units. So sample is a subset, and then we do statistics that can describe this sample by aggregating the information from the individual units of analysis. The biggest thing we have is what's called a population. Now, it's important to say it's a population, not the population, right? The indefinite article is important there. And the reason it is because there's not just there's not one human population. A population is defined by the interests of the researcher or statistician. The cases or the population is to whom you desire to generalize your results, right? If you say that you're studying people with depression in the United States, then you don't want to study all humans. You just want to describe people with depression in the United States. And so that would be your population. So there's a potentially infinite number of populations within the human world population, right? And so this is important to realize. Population is the entire set of units of analysis about which we are attempting to gain information and make generalizations. So the fact of the matter is, we can essentially never measure an entire population, right? Even if you just want to measure everyone with depression in Arizona, how are you going to do that, right? How is it possible? So if I want to be able to talk about people with depression in the state of Arizona, I'm going to have to get a sample of them, because one person's going to no longer meet the diagnostic criteria, a new person's going to be added, someone's going to pass away. Trying to find every single case and make sure diagnostically it's correct, it's just impossible, right? And so populations are often unknowable and unmeasurable in a direct sense. And that's why we need statistics, because we need to then have a sample that we can use to describe a population. But there's going to be a bunch of things that we need to consider as far as the methodology we use to determine whether or not those generalizations will be appropriate, right? And the strength